On the international arena, he has his plate full, Donald Trump. There are two ongoing wars in Gaza and Ukraine. Just ahead of the inauguration ceremony on the 20th, which is today, there was a big fillip in the form of a temporary truce announced by both Israel and Hamas. The first part of that truce came into effect on Sunday, yesterday, when 3 Israeli hostages, all 3 women, were released in lieu for 90 Palestinian prisoners who were also released from various Israeli prisons. There is, of course, the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. Trump has vowed to end that even before he takes office. That has not come to pass. And then, of course, there are the larger issues at play. The ever-looming and ever-increasing threat of China. The coming together of Russia, China, and Iran in an unlikely alliance. How disruptive is Trump 2.0 going to be? We'll get to that and more in just 1 second. But first, the big story. Incidentally, on Martin Luther King Day Jr. In the United States, Donald Trump will be sworn in the next couple of hours as the 47th President of the United States. So let's tell you what Donald Trump's expansive agenda is looking like. The first 100 days of a presidency have historically been a key measure as to what the agenda for the incoming president is. And Donald Trump has very plainly and clearly laid out his agenda. Number 1 is immigration reform. Trump is planning a significant overhaul of American immigration policy, including threatened mass deportation programs which target undocumented immigrants. In fact, by some estimates, there are more than 1 million undocumented immigrants, and he is promising to throw every one of them out. He's also keen on ending birthright citizenship for children of non-citizens. So if you are a child who's born in the US, automatically you get citizenship irrespective of whether your parents happen to be American citizens. Also, he has threatened penalties and tariffs on countries like Mexico and Canada, America's 2 neighbors to the south and the north, for illegal immigration into America. The second big expansive agenda has got to do with trade and tariffs. A central theme of Trump's agenda is America first when it comes to trade and tariffs. He intends to impose very extensive tariffs on imports to protect American manufacturing and address trade deficits, particularly with manufacturing-heavy countries like China. Trump has threatened up to 70% tariffs on those countries that are exporting into America. The third big agenda item in his priority list is dismantling regulation. Trump is committed to reducing the regulatory framework, the bureaucracy, all of which was established during previous administrations. He views over-regulation as a hindrance to growth and technological innovation. In fact, Trump's administration will focus on deregulating sectors like energy, technology, and finance. He's already established a Department of Government Efficiency under both Elon Musk, the founder and CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, and Vivek Ramaswamy, who will be the co-chair of DOGE, or the Department of Government Efficiency. There's also energy policy. Trump has been a great believer in going back to fossil fuels. His agenda will involve reversing many of Biden's environmental policies. In fact, at one point, Trump even wanted to get rid of what's called the Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA. He plans to promote fossil fuel production. Drill, baby, drill was one of his campaign slogans. He plans to lift restrictions on fracking. He will also withdraw from international climate agreements like the Paris Accord. And then, of course, finally, there's the cultural issues and social conversations. The second term under Trump will see intensifying cultural debates around education, around social policies. He's proposed to defund any educational institution, any public educational institution that promotes diversity initiatives, or DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, or critical race theory. Trump has also said he would restrict transgenders from taking part in women's sports. Now, ahead of his inauguration, the president-elect promised to sign a ton of executive orders. Like I said, more than 100 executive orders on his very first day, right after taking oath of office. He signed, in fact, 220 orders in his first administration, in his first term from 2017 to 2021. His second term is expected to follow up on that model. The executive orders could include mass deportations, up to 1 million people being sent back, ending birthright citizenship. Like I said, if you're a child born in the US, you automatically get citizenship. Trump wants to end that. The January 6th Capitol Hill rioters, he wants to pardon every single one of them. He's in fact said that he would do that on day 1. He's also said that he would end the Russia-Ukraine war on day 1. That hasn't come to pass just yet. We'll see if at all that happens. Tariffs, that's going to be another big agenda item for Donald Trump. Tariffs on export countries, export-heavy countries like China, even allies like Germany, which are very heavily dependent on exports. He has promised to end any kind of EV mandate or electric vehicle subsidies that are being given to the electric vehicle industry. There will also be a boost to mass oil drilling. Drill, baby, drill is a campaign slogan that he used. And then, of course, when it comes to this social and woke issues, banning transgenders from competing in women's sports and also ending all gender-affirming care practices. Also, he has vowed to make America and its auto industry great again. Let's listen in to what Trump had to say at what was billed as a victory rally at the Capital One Arena the night before he gets sworn in for a second term.
Tomorrow we will end 4 years of failure, disaster, and decline. And we will begin the 4 greatest years in the history of our country. We're going to turn it around. We're going to turn it around quick, and we're going to do things that nobody thought even were possible. My administration will take immediate and decisive action to confront every single problem America faces and put our nation back on the path to success and greatness. Within hours of taking office, I will sign dozens of executive orders, close to 100 to be exact. I will end the war in Ukraine, I will stop the chaos in the Middle East, and I will prevent World War III from happening. Perhaps most beautiful of all, this week we achieved an epic ceasefire agreement as a first step toward lasting peace in the Middle East. And this agreement could only have happened as a result of our historic victory in November. That was some victory. Was that the greatest?
All right, Trump and his wife, Melania Trump, along with J.D. Vance and his wife, Usha Vance, are currently attending the church service. Now, the Vances have reached the White House. They're being greeted by Vice President Kamala Harris and her husband, Doug Emhoff. Of course, J.D. Vance becomes the 3rd youngest vice president in U.S. history. This is a customary photo opportunity between the Vances and Kamala Harris and her husband, Douglas Emhoff, who becomes the second gentleman. Of course, they will then be greeted into the White House, and then in a few minutes, Donald Trump and his wife, Melania Trump, will be greeted by Joe Biden and his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, and they will be taken inside the White House. And eventually, for the swearing-in ceremony, which is expected to happen post 10 p.m. India time, the Bidens will ride with the Trumps to the Capitol Rotunda building. The ceremony has been shifted indoors because of the snowstorm that is expected to hit Washington, D.C. So let me go across as we stay on these live pictures. I want to first go across to my colleague Sanjay Suri, who's joining us live from Washington, D.C. First of all, just paint the picture for us. You're outside the Capitol Hill. Of course, the inauguration traditionally happens at the forecourt or the steps right outside the Capitol Hill, but this time it's been moved back indoors because of the snowstorm. What can we expect in the next couple of hours?
Well, there's going to be a number of ceremonies underway, and a lot of these are, of course, traditional. We have the church service that you were describing. Then the president-elect will go to White House, and together with Biden will move down Pennsylvania Avenue right to Capitol Hill here. That is a traditional move to show and to demonstrate to the world that the transition has been smooth. It wasn't so last time because Joe Biden came on his own to Capitol Hill. Trump did not accompany him. This time Biden will be with Trump, and of course they're going to come to the Capitol Hill here, and that's where the inauguration will happen. And the inauguration, of course, is ceremonial. It's just a one-line oath that he will defend the Constitution and carry out his duties faithfully. But what's going to happen will be explosive starting straight after that, Zakka, because it's not going to be a moment to lose really for Trump. Quite literally, straight after the oath taking, he will begin to issue many of those orders that you've been describing. He will not even wait for lunch. So we're going to have a rush of orders straight away, straight after the inauguration.
All right, Sanjay, stay on with us. I also want to go across to CNN's Rafael Romo, who's joining us live from the U.S. Capitol. So as Sanjay, my colleague, was saying a moment ago, Rafael, Trump has said that he's planning to sign over 100 executive orders on day one itself. Do we have any idea on what these executive orders could be?
Yes, we do. Donald Trump is expected to issue a long list of executive orders in the next few hours as he begins his second term in the White House. The president-elect himself said last night during a rally that it's close to 100 executive orders, and according to a top advisor, those executive orders include actions on immigration, energy, and the shape of government in major metropolitan areas. Immigration raids could begin almost immediately as the new president follows through on campaign promises to deport undocumented migrants. Inside jail cells, January 6, 2021, defendants will await word on pardons, which Trump has promised to sign as soon as he returned to power. The third possibility is that Trump will impose tariffs on countries like China and others, including close partners and neighbors like Mexico and Canada. So that's what he's talking about.
Rafael, so we've seen the first term of Trump between 2017 and 2021, extremely disruptive, particularly on the global arena. Now he has two ongoing wars, one between Israel and Hamas and another between Russia and Ukraine. How do you think the second Trump term, would it be more disruptive on the global stage than his first term?
Well, it remains to be seen, but this is what we know. One Trump advisor told CNN that they just want to come in and show just how serious they are, adding that Trump is back and it's go time, describing the new government as, quote, a shock to the system. What this means in theory is that the new Trump government will be a sharp break not only from the last 4 years, but also from the chaos that governed the early days of Trump's first go around. Just to give you an idea, Trump promised to end birthright citizenship, but that would require changing the Constitution, which is not something that can be accomplished in a single day.
All right, Rafael Romo for CNN reporting for us tonight. Thank you very much for joining us, overlooking, of course, the iconic Washington Monument right behind him. Sanjay is still with us, and I want to focus on what a second Trump term could mean for the Indo-US relationship. As you see, the Trumps now, I think they are exiting the church. This was some moments ago. They go to the St. John's Cathedral where the Inauguration Day Mass happens. Both Donald Trump and his wife Melania Trump attending that traditional Christian Mass. And then they are now, right now, I believe, en route to the White House, where they will be welcomed by the outgoing President Joe Biden and his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, who will then, of course, escort the both of them into the White House. And then the Trumps and the Bidens will ride together to go to the Capitol Hill for the inauguration ceremony. So what is it? What's in it for India? Will Trump 2.0 be better for India and India's interests, or will Trump's America First approach prove to be costly on the Indo-US relationship? Trump's America First policy is likely to influence his trade dynamics significantly. India, too, could face increased tariffs on its exports, particularly when it comes to pharmaceuticals, textiles. There is, of course, strengthening defense ties, which will be a cornerstone of India-US ties. Trump will continue to enhance military-to-military collaboration, whether it's through joint exercises like the Malabar exercise, arms sales. Remember, there were two big deals that were announced when Prime Minister Modi went for the state visit a couple of years ago, both of which have not completely seen the light of day. One, of course, the GE jet engine deal, and then, of course, the MQ-9 Predator deals, the drones, which were to be sold to the Navy primarily, but to the other two services as well. One good thing, though, and this is a big positive for India, both Marco Rubio, who's the incoming Secretary of State, and Mike Waltz, who's the incoming National Security Advisor, both of them very pro-India and could steer America's diplomacy in a favorable direction towards India. Trump's restrictive immigration policies, particularly when it comes to H-1B visas, that is a cause of concern, and that could pose challenges for Indian techies in the United States. There are more than 350,000 Indian techies who hold H-1B visas. they and their families could be affected. Remember last time when Trump was president in his previous term, he stopped the spouses of H-1B visa holders from being able to work in the US, and that of course was disruptive for a number of families. Whether or not he once and for all does away with H-1B, which may not be easy because remember his tech funders, including the likes of Elon Musk, have come out openly in support of H-1B, so much so that Trump himself has had to nuance his position on H-1B compared to what it was 8 years ago. The US strategy under Trump is expected to maintain a strong stand against China, particularly when it comes to trade and tariffs. He's talked about as much as 70% tariffs on China, but not just on the trade front, but there could be enhanced cooperation in the Indo-Pacific through the Quad. Remember, it was in the previous term that the Quad really got a facelift. He lifted it up to the ministerial level, and then of course the Biden administration followed suit, and eventually the Quad is now a summit-level meeting that happens once a year. In fact, tomorrow, right after the inauguration, there will be the first Quad foreign ministers meeting of the Trump second term. He could also alternately put pressure on Pakistan to curtail terror groups that are aimed at India. So let me go back to Sanjay Suri, our colleague there in Washington, D.C., live outside the Capitol Hill. The big concern, Sanjay, is around H-1B visas. Tell us a little bit more about what could be the possible thinking. Has Trump's own position changed from what it was in his first term? Because immigration has really been, open threadbare as the bare bones issue in this election. In fact, he made it a big issue. All his surrogates have made it into a big issue. How much will the H-1B conversation be a thorn in the Indo-US partnership?
Zakka, at the popular level, the immigration concerns over the migration from the southern border from Mexico really have been the prime issue. And that has been the case also in the government rhetoric that we've had so far. By way of government, of course, being the government coming in, this is what Trump has been talking about. At the public level, this seems to overlap with concerns over the H-1B visa. But then at the government level, really, a clear distinction is beginning to emerge. It is very clear that Trump is going to move very, very quickly and very hard against undocumented migrants. And we are talking about millions and millions. He plans to deport 1 million in the first 1 year, and that will not be the end of it. There are about 11 million at least such migrants in the US. So he intends to put them all on a one-way flight out. It's not going to be logistically or legally easy. But that is the popular perception about migration and the popular opposition that Trump is riding on. He did so when he was campaigning. He will do so now as president. But this is distinct clearly from the H-1B visa. He did move against spouses in his first term over the H-1B visa, but clearly this time he's making a distinction, and the recent signals we've had from his close circle have not been signals that suggest that he'll move very strongly against the H-1B visa.
All right, Sanjay, we'll leave it at that. We'll be in touch with you through the course of the next few hours. Like I said, in about an hour, a couple of hours actually, by about 10:15 or so, is when we expect Donald Trump to be sworn in as the 47th President of the United States, as we see live pictures from the White House and the U.S. Capitol building, where, of course, traditionally the inauguration ceremony, the swearing in, has happened on the footsteps of the Capitol Hill building. But today, because of the predicted snowstorm in Washington, D.C., it's been moved indoors to the Rotunda building. I think about 2,000 guests, we're told, will be taking part in that ceremony live. These are the live pictures you're getting from the actual venue where the inauguration and the swearing in will happen. One of the guests happens to be Reliance Industries Chairman Mukesh Ambani and Reliance Foundation Chairperson Neeta Ambani, both of whom are going to be in attendance at Donald Trump's inauguration. They, in fact, attended a private reception on the 18th of January and then posed for a photograph with the president-elect on the eve of his swearing-in ceremony. The Ambanis were among a select group of 100 global leaders and luminaries who've been invited to an intimate gathering, and of course who've been invited now for the inauguration that we're expecting will get underway in the next couple of hours.
Which is, unheard of, especially, I shouldn't say this, for a Republican. The Republicans are actually becoming the mainstream party. And very importantly, which is, unheard of, especially, I shouldn't say this, for a Republican. The Republicans are actually...
And I caught up with former Indian ambassador to the United States and also former Foreign Secretary Dr. Harsh Shringla on what the Trump second term might mean for the Indo-US relationship. Remember, this is now characterized as a global strategic partnership. But what may it mean in terms of immigration? What may it mean in terms of trade and tariffs? And most importantly, the elephant in the room, which is the clear and present danger of an aggressive and almost hegemonic China. How will Trump help India counter that? This is my conversation with former Foreign Secretary and former Ambassador to the United States, Harsh Shringla. So as Donald Trump gets ready to become the 47th President of the United States, to be sworn in for a second term, what shape and form and what direction will Indo-US ties take in a second Trump presidency? I'm now joined by Mr. Harshvardhan Shringla, somebody who's been Indian Ambassador to the United States and also former Foreign Secretary. Thank you very much, sir, for speaking with us on CNN News 18. Obviously, the first point of concern, some would say, in the Indo-US bilateral would be around H-1B visas. Of course, Trump has changed his position somewhat on H-1B. How do you reckon this issue might play out over the next 4 years?
You're absolutely right, Zakka, in saying that immigration and issues related to, let's say, dealing with foreigners who in the United States were going to be a priority for the Trump administration. We are obviously concerned about our legal immigrants in the United States. This includes a lot of young people who are on H-1B visas, who are keen to access H-1B visas. And I think we have to remember that this is a two-way service. I mean, those of our young people, our best talent who is going to the United States on H-1B visas are contributing enormously to the productivity and output, especially in technology and high-tech areas in the United States. And at the same time, I think the US, of course, is giving them very useful exposure, experience, and of course, I think the opportunity to look at a very promising career ahead. So let's come down to what Trump would, I think, look at it from his perspective. Clearly, there is a debate in the system on even issues involving legal migration. Trump has said in the past that Indian students who are in the United States should have access to green cards, but there are also people who oppose that legal entry. I would say that I think Trump, if he's looking at the larger MAGA picture, which is essentially to create manufacturing, to attract manufacturing, to attract investments, to increase the possibility of production within the United States, he will have to allow or streamline the legal migration process and get the right people also who can be part of that exercise. At this point of time, with unemployment at a very low level in the US, I think the scope to expand on an employment base is very, very limited. You need to get talent, you need to get the right people, and of course, you need to get people who are going to man or who are going to be able to run these new industries and the new, whether it's technology or whatever it is. So this, I think, is going to be a debate, and I don't know who's going to come out on top. But my own sense is, if it's a rational decision, then certainly I think we will be seeing a greater streamlining of that system.
I do want to talk about, he had mentioned this in the first term as well about tariffs. I mean, he had a pet peeve around Harley Davidsons and the sort of what he felt were very steep tariffs on Harley Davidsons into India. Do you reckon, given all his rhetoric around tariffs, 25% on Mexico, 70% on China, so on and so forth, that India too would willy-nilly become a victim of these tariffs, whether it's pharmaceuticals, textiles, etc.?
Well, Trump has spoken on and off about, India having very high tariffs, and that his desire to bring tariffs on a more reciprocal basis. But this has been part of our dialogue even in the first Trump presidency, when we did start negotiations on a free trade agreement that would allow greater market access to both countries. And I would think that this time we should preempt that conversation by really looking at re-engaging on where we left off on that free trade agreement. And of course, remember that there are much larger, I would say, offenders from Trump's point of view who are on his radar screen China's trade surplus to the United States exceeds $300 billion. Ours is at the range of 40 to 60 billion, and that's definitely much lower than what the Chinese tariffs, the Chinese exports to the United States are. And I think he will focus first on countries like China, where I think he would certainly use that leverage to see if there can be some sort of rationalization of that structure. If he increases tariffs on Chinese products, it also gives us market openings and opportunities. We should not forget that last time he increased tariffs on Chinese products by 25%. It opened up a significant market. Our exports went up. So there are opportunities in all of this, and we should look at the opportunities. But also, I think we should be early on in engaging the United States on issues such as immigration, trade, etc., preempting negotiations that can be more harder and more difficult as time goes on. So we don't wait for it, we reach them as early as possible.
And one final word, Ambassador Shringla, on this whole issue of, will Trump's prism of viewing India be squarely from, as a counterweight to China? He was the one who sort of pushed for the Quad arrangement. Of course, the Biden administration then elevated it to the summit level. And I believe tomorrow there will be the first Quad foreign ministers meeting under the Trump presidency. Is he going to look at India, at least from a strategic sense, purely as a counterbalance or a counterweight to China?
Well, that would certainly be a priority. After all, in a global, comprehensive strategic partnership, the focus is on pooling your capacities and resources in whichever way is possible. In the first Trump administration, we saw Trump take a lot of interest in that direction. We had, focus on the Indo-Pacific. In fact, it was Trump who changed the term from the Pacific Command to the Indo-Pacific Command. Yeah. We had the start of the 2+2 dialogue, and the Quad that you mentioned also started under Trump's, the revitalization of the Quad started under Trump. Later, the Biden administration took it to the summit level. So I'm not surprised that Quad will receive a lot of attention during Trump's period. And remember that Trump's key advisors and key, secretaries have many of them have spoken about the fact that you need to focus on the Indo-Pacific, which is what India has been saying all along, that, a war in Europe is taking away attention, drawing attention and distracting focus from the Indo-Pacific where it is needed the most. And now that I think Trump's vision as well as his advisors are all talking about the fact that you need to settle the Ukraine conflict and move into a greater focus in the Indo-Pacific also plays to our advantage. But remember that Trump also sees India as a large market, as not a developing country. He sees India as a developed country. He sees India as a land of economic opportunities. So it's not just strategic and political. It is also economic. It is also technology based. And I think there are a lot of opportunities that will come even on the economic level as you go on to Trump 2.0.
All right. We'll leave it at that. Ambassador Harshvardhan Shringla, thank you very much for joining us here on our special coverage. And as we see those live pictures at the footsteps of the White House, where Joe Biden, the outgoing U.S. president, has welcomed his successor, Donald Trump, who will be sworn in and inaugurated as the 47th president of the United States. You can see their respective spouses as well. Dr. Jill Biden, the outgoing First Lady, welcoming the incoming First Lady, Melania Trump. So the Trumps and the Bidens, they are familiar figures. Remember in 2020, Biden beat Trump and won the election. That was 4 years ago. In the 2024 election, of course, it was supposed to be again Biden versus Trump, a rematch, but then Biden pulled out of the race, citing his advanced health and, of course, mental condition as well. Kamala Harris, who was the incumbent vice president, then challenged Donald Trump, but she lost that election on the 5th of November last year, and now Donald Trump becomes the President of the United States yet again, to be sworn in as the 47th President in an hour and a half's time from now. Donald Trump is all set to be inaugurated as the 47th President of the United States at a victory rally at the Capital One Arena last night. He's already claimed credit for the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. He, of course, has his task cut out, already having said that he will end the war between Russia and Ukraine, and, of course, these mass tariffs that he plans to impose on countries like China that export into the United States, as well as countries in Europe. How could Trump and his presidency, his second term, how could it possibly rupture existing fault lines between America and its various allies? I'm now joined by Stephen Erlanger. He's the chief diplomatic correspondent in Europe for the New York Times. Thank you very much, Mr. Erlanger, for speaking with us. Let me start with what Trump said last night at his victory rally. He's already claimed credit for the ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel. Do you reckon, though, that the ceasefire will last and that we could be moving in a direction of a permanent peace?
Well, we can hope so. Trump naturally called everything he does epic, so this was an epic ceasefire. The problem is it's just a ceasefire. The war's not over. They won't even begin to negotiate the real deal that needs to be done, the second phase of the agreement, for another 2 weeks. A lot can go wrong. The Israeli government of Benjamin Netanyahu is under a great deal of pressure from his more far-right allies to continue the war, to find some excuse to say that Hamas has broken the ceasefire. And Netanyahu has stressed that the agreement allows him to resume the war if Israel decides to. So it is very shaky. Obviously, the Israelis want to get their hostages home, dead and alive, and but to end the war, to get through the second phase, would require Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, from all these buffer zones and security zones that they've already established. So it's going to be a hard road, let alone releasing thousands of Palestinian prisoners, some of whom obviously are guilty of killing Israelis, many of whom are not. And for Hamas, this can feel a bit like a victory, partly because despite the death and destruction it caused by starting this war, it's still there, and Israel has refused to discuss what might take its place inside Gaza. So Hamas feels free to reestablish its control there.
I do want to ask you about the Russia-Ukraine war. Trump did say multiple times during the campaign that he will end the war between Russia and Ukraine on day one of his presidency. That hasn't come to pass yet. How easy or difficult would it be to cut a deal between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, it's hard because both sides need to want to do a deal. Now, I think Ukraine wants to have a serious discussion, partly because it wants to stay on Trump's good side. It needs U.S. help. But to convince Vladimir Putin to end the war, a war he believes that he is winning, a war where he believes Russia will outlast Western support for Ukraine, morale in Ukraine is bad, Ukraine's slowly losing territory in the east. To convince Putin to stop, I think, is going to be very difficult. Now, Trump is, a convincer. I'm sure there'll be a meeting. There'll be a lot of us following this meeting between Putin and Trump, but I don't think you can solve the war over the heads of the Ukrainians. And it could be this big meeting doesn't actually result in anything terribly substantive. It's a terribly difficult problem. No one ever believed he was going to end the war in a day, not even Trump. But now they're talking about 100 days. Even that seems fairly optimistic. Because the big question is, okay, you can end the war, ideally. Then how do you protect Ukraine forever from another intervention by Russia 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road? And that's a very delicate problem.
I do want to talk about America and Europe under Trump. In his first term, he did sort of crib about the Europeans not contributing enough to NATO, not taking care of their security enough. In recent weeks, we've seen Elon Musk, somebody who's going to be a very powerful figure in the Trump administration, publicly going after elected governments in Britain, in France, even in Germany. He's thrown his support behind the far-right AfD party. How do you see America-Europe ties and the fault line in those ties playing itself out in Trump's second term?
Well, it's very odd for how to see America going after its allies before it goes after its enemies, I have to say. The big question, and we're all wondering, is how long Trump will put up with Elon Musk. Already, Steve Bannon wants Musk banned from the White House. And Musk has his own agenda. I mean, he's pushing against the Europeans partly for his own business reasons. I mean, Brussels is famous for its regulations, and it wants to regulate things like X and Instagram more. So he says he believes in free speech, of course, but what he wants to do is not get regulated. And he's been going after basically left and center-left governments. I mean, not even center-right governments. I mean, Keir Starmer, Olaf Scholz, and, you know, maybe it's hard to tell. I mean, he seems in this weird way, like Bannon did, to try to create some kind of far-right alliance. But I think it's going to be very difficult. I think Europe, after the first Trump term, has actually thought pretty hard about what to do. And of course, you have to wait to see what actually happens, like tariffs. I mean, Trump's claims he's going to put 20% tariffs on everything, which would hugely raise prices for Americans. And of course, the Europeans have already drawn up their own potential counter tariffs on things that the Americans care about. Right. And so we're going to have this kind of battle when, in fact, really, sometimes you think the United States should really be talking about Russia and China, not annoying the Danes.
All right, Stephen Erlanger, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for joining us. Stephen Erlanger, the Chief Diplomatic Correspondent for Europe with the New York Times. Some domestic news now. And on the 9th of August last year, a postgraduate trainee was raped, tortured and murdered inside a seminar hall of the RG Kaur Medical College Hospital in Kolkata. What followed was a nationwide cry for justice. People from all walks of life joined in to demand justice for another of India's daughters who had been wronged. But a 5-month relentless fight seems to have gone in vain, because today the accused, Sanjay Roy, escaped the gallows. A sessions court in Bengal sentenced the man convicted of rape and murder to life unto death. Here's what happened in the courtroom today. The CBI claimed that this was one of the rarest of rare cases, which is a criteria for awarding the death penalty. The CBI pushed for the death penalty for Sanjay Roy. The accused lawyer, on the other hand, pled that the client was innocent and was rather being framed, while Abhay's parents, the victim's parents, maintain that the investigation is only half done and that the other accused in the case is still at large. The CBI claimed that the death penalty will bring back society's faith. The accused, however, continued to claim that he was tortured and not allowed to speak, and that he was not the one behind this heinous crime. The parents appealed to the court for death penalty. The CBI appealed to the court that there must be a degree of confidence that must be restored in society, that justice must be done and be seen to be done. Trying to further the argument, the accused even claimed that he was wearing a Rudraksh, which would have been broken if he was present at the crime spot. But the judge did not pay heed to that argument and found Sanjay Roy guilty of the crime. Meanwhile, the parents appealed to the judge for capital punishment and said that they are seeking justice, not compensation. But eventually, the Sessions Court in Sialdah ruled against the death penalty. Judge Anirban Das, while pronouncing the order, said, addressing Sanjay Roy, he said that you were told that you are guilty. He told the court that the CBI advocated for a death penalty for the accused. However, this is not one of the rarest of rare cases. He then also said that 17 lakh rupees should be paid by the state as compensation to the parents of Abhay. When Abhay's parents refused to take that money, the judge said that this compensation is statutory and hence the accused and the state have been ordered to pay up that money. The judge in his order also detailed why he believes Sanjay Roy did not deserve the death penalty despite the heinous nature of the crime that he was convicted for. The judge wrote, "The judiciary's primary responsibility is to uphold the rule of law and ensure justice based on evidence, not on public sentiment. It is of prime importance that the court maintain its objectivity and impartiality by focusing solely on the facts and the evidence presented during the trial rather than being swayed by public opinion or an emotional reaction." Furthermore, the court also said that it must consider the rights and circumstances of the accused as well as the broader implications of its decisions. In this particular instance, it is crucial to note that there is no evidence of any prior criminal behavior or misconduct by Sanjay Roy, the convict. In the realm of modern justice, we must rise above the primitive instinct of an eye for an eye, or a tooth for a tooth, or a nail for a nail, or a life for a life. Our duty is not to match brutality with brutality, but to elevate humanity through wisdom, compassion, and a deeper understanding of justice. Now, the judge observed that this was not one of the rarest of rare cases, which is a criteria for awarding the death penalty. The question then naturally arises, what makes a case the rarest of rare? One, the aggravating circumstances, that the crime must be extremely brutal and must be extremely culpable in nature. The mitigating circumstance is that the offender's background and mental state must be noted before a sentence can be awarded. The potential for rehabilitation and reform must be considered before awarding the death penalty. Also, collective conscience. The crime should have and must have shaken the collective conscience of society. It also has to be an uncommon crime. It must be unusual. No alternative punishment is viable. And public abhorrence. The crime is so heinous that it warrants public abhorrence. The punishment should respond to society's cry for justice. Now, the court in its wisdom has refused to call this a rarest of rare case, but this is what the victim Abhya had to endure. Her endocervical canal had a 150-gram vicoid fluid. Her genitals were tortured, they were torn apart. Her legs and her face were injured quite brutally. Her spectacles were broken. There were shards of glass from her spectacles which entered her eyes, which damaged her eyes. The thyroid cartilage was broken. The nose and mouth both were clamped, left with a shudder on her bare body while she died. Now, many people are arguing, including many resident doctors and practicing doctors at the RG Kar Medical Hospital, they are arguing that if this is not the rarest of rare case, then what is? So they have been protesting outside the college. They want the state government, they want the central government and agencies, the CBI, to go in appeals so that a death sentence can be procured for the lone convict in this case, Sanjay Roy. So from the state government to the doctors who are back on the streets protesting, everyone seems to be dissatisfied that this order was for life and not for the death penalty. Mamata Banerjee, the West Bengal Chief Minister, has said she's not satisfied with the quantum. The case was taken from the Bengal police and investigated by the CBI. So the TMC is making that a point of contention, saying that if the Bengal police had continued to investigate, they would have perhaps found a conviction in this case and also perhaps a death penalty. The protesting doctors outside RG Kar are saying that investigating agencies failed to convince the judge that there was enough evidence which should have been produced in the trial, but they are claiming that enough evidence was not produced during the course of the trial, which would have landed in a death penalty for Sanjay Roy. The victim's parents have said that they don't want compensation. Remember, the court in its order said that 17 lakh rupees need to be paid as compensation to the victim's family. This is a statutory requirement. They, in fact, have rejected that compensation and said what they want is justice instead.
ফাঁসির দাবিতে আমি নিজেও মিছিল করেছিলাম, সবাই করেছে। সুতরাং এটা জাজেদের উপর নির্ভর করে এবং কিভাবে কেস সাজানো হয়েছে। আমরা তো পরপর 3টে কেসে ফাঁসি করে দিই, 54 দিনের মধ্যে করেছি, কিন্তু জাজেরা একটু টাইম নেয়, তার কারণ তাকে দেখতে হয় আফটারে এটা জুডিশিয়ারিকেও আমি থ্যাঙ্কস জানাই এবং আমাদের টিম অফ ইনভেস্টিগেশনকেও টাইম নেয়। সুতরাং এই কেসটাকেও আমরা বিচার চাই।
Ashfaqullah, life imprisonment. Was this something which is expected?
This is, completely half of justice, you can say, or you can say unsatisfactory justice. Because what we believe that this is the rarest of rarest crime, judge says this is not the rarest of rare crime. So that's the different part, but we believe that this is the, starting of the ending of the justice. So this is the starting, this is not the ending of the justice system. So we have the higher court, there's high court, we have the Supreme Court. We have different, questions, we have different emotion, we have different people. So we'll put all together and we'll fight for the, we'll fight in the next level, because everyone it's everyone who have the thinking power, they can laugh about it. This is not a justice for one murder case.
Are you all really shocked with this judgment?
Yeah, we are completely shocked. We are unbelievable justice, but justice is different things because judge give the order on the basis of surroundings evidence. So we believe that there is a lack of evidence, there is incomplete investigation. So we believe there is a lot more to do in this case. So
And you will fight?
We will fight. Definitely we will fight.
Your parents?
Yeah, always with the parents. We will definitely fight with the parents, with the whole Avayas parent for this country.
In the wee hours of Thursday last, Saif Ali Khan's home in Bandra was broken into and the attacker inflicted as many as 6 stab injuries on the 56-year-old actor. The intruder had managed to break into the actor's home through the fire exit at the back of the building. His maid spotted him and screamed. When Saif Ali Khan confronted the robber, the attacker stabbed him as many as 6 times and then he fled. The actor was rushed to the nearby Lilavati hospital where currently he's recuperating. Over the weekend, in a sensational development, the Mumbai police revealed that the man arrested for allegedly breaking into Saif's house and stabbing him is a Bangladeshi national who had entered India illegally 7 years ago and was staying as an illegal immigrant. He evaded the law for over 80 hours but was finally tracked down by the Mumbai police. According to police sources, the breakthrough in the case came from CCTV footage. The accused was purportedly seen buying a cell phone cover from a shop in Dadar, as well as some food from a stall in Worli, where he made an online payment using UPI. Following that payment, his cell phone number was tracked. The cell phone number was tracked to the IMEI code, etc., and that led the police to a labor camp in Thane. The contractor who had hired this alleged attacker a few months back was identified. He was questioned. A team of 100 officers was dispatched to that area who initially found nothing. They didn't find a trace of this man. As the search widened, a team led by DCP Navnath Dhawale reportedly spotted the accused who was hiding in the mangroves very close to that labor camp in Thane. When he tried to flee, he was apprehended and later placed under arrest. Now, the accused has been identified as Muhammad Shariful Islam Shehzad. The investigation has revealed that the accused does not have any Indian documents to prove that he's an Indian citizen. The police also say that some items have been recovered from him which suggest that he is an illegal immigrant from Bangladesh, that he came to India illegally and changed his name to Bijoy Das. He's been living in Mumbai for about the last 4 months. He was working at a housekeeping agency. He allegedly left a job about a fortnight ago and has been unemployed since. Muhammad Shariful Islam was earlier involved in a petty theft case. The accused used to work at a restaurant and pub in the Worli area through a contractor. There, when he was working in this pub, he allegedly stole a diamond ring which belonged to one of the customers. In August of last year, the incident had come to light after the owner of the ring filed a police complaint. Various CCTV camera footage were examined, and as this man, Shariful Muhammad Islam Shehzad, was found in possession of this diamond ring, he was fired from his job at the pub in Worli at that time.
There is a primary evidence to anticipate that this accused is Bangladeshi. He doesn't have a Indian valid document, and there are some seizures which indicate that he is a Bangladeshi national. ये accused पिछले 5-6 महीने पहले मुंबई आया है ऐसा पता चला है. कुछ दिन ये मुंबई में रहा, बाद में मुंबई की विसिनिटी के कुछ टाउन्स में रहा और 15 दिन पहले फिर मुंबई आया है ऐसा इन्वेस्टिगेशन में पता चला.
All right, we'll take a quick break here in the program. When we come back, it's day 1 of the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas, which has come into force starting Sunday. Hamas first released 3 Israeli hostages, all 3 of them women. In exchange, Israel freed about 90 Palestinian prisoners, sending them to the West Bank and to Gaza. The first phase of the truce is expected to last for another 40 days. The big question is, will it actually last? On the other side.
Co-powered by
Yes.
לא הסיכוי שנוותר על האחד שתחזירי לנו. אין יום שלא חשבנו עלייך, עשינו הכל מהבוקר עד הלילה רק להחזיר אותך אלינו. זהו עכשיו אותי.
גל, שומע אותי?
כן, שלום. ראש הממשלה, אני נמצא במרכז המבצעים שלנו, של מערכת הביטחון, עם המוסד, עם השב"כ, עם צה"ל, עם כל המערכת שלנו, ואני רוצה לדווח לך שהחטופות שלנו הועברו לידי כוחותינו, וממש בדקות האלה הן עוברות את הגבול לשטחנו. אני מתרגש מאוד.
הן חצו כבר את הגבול לישראל?
זה ממש קורה בדקות האלה, עכשיו.
אז ברגע שזה קורה, דווח לי שהן נמצאות בשטח המדינה שלנו. זה יום מאוד מרגש. אלה החטופות הראשונות בסבב הזה שאנחנו מחזירים הביתה, ואני מבקש גל שתמסור להן, לרומי, לדורון, לאמילי, עם שלם מחבק אתכם. ברוכות השבות הביתה.
By the 16th day of the deal, talks will begin in the second phase. This phase includes the release of Israeli soldiers and a permanent end of the war without Hamas in power or able to threaten Israel. Hundreds of trucks are entering Gaza as I speak. They're carrying assistance for civilians who suffered enormously from the war that Hamas started on October 7, 2023, nearly 15 months ago. Today alone, we anticipate several hundred trucks will enter the Gaza Strip as I'm speaking. And after so much pain, destruction, loss of life, today the
Video released by the Israeli government showed the raw, emotional, tearful scenes inside a hospital where 3 women held captive in Gaza for 15 months were finally reunited with family members and loved ones on Sunday. The release of Emily, Damari, Doron Steinbrecher, and Romi Gonen marked what is meant to be the beginning of an initial phase in a ceasefire deal between Israel and the Palestinian Hamas militant group. Hamas fighters celebrating the ceasefire delivered the hostages to the Red Cross earlier in the day, which then transferred them to Israeli forces.
אני רוצה לדווח לך שהחטופות שלנו הועברו לידי כוחותינו, וממש בדקות האלה...
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a video of him receiving a phone call that the 3 were in Israeli hands.
ואני מבקש גל שתמסור להן, לרומי, לדורון, לאמילי, עם שלם מחבק אתכם.
He said that the entire nation embraced them. Israel has pledged to release Palestinian prisoners from its jails as part of the agreement. The exchange of prisoners and captives was a primary goal of the ceasefire reached last week with the help of the U.S., Egypt, and Qatar, aiming to end more than a year of devastating war in Gaza. The fighting erupted when Hamas gunmen rampaged through Israeli communities on October 7, 2023, killing 1,200 and taking more than 250 hostages. Israel launched a massive military operation, it said, aimed at freeing the captives and destroying Hamas. Palestinian health officials say the onslaught killed nearly 47,000, reduced the enclave to rubble, and displaced almost the entire population of over 2 million. Palestinians praised the ceasefire, which permits 600 truckloads of desperately needed aid to enter Gaza every day in the initial 6-week period. The truce also calls for fighting to stop and 33 of nearly 100 Israeli and foreign hostages to go free over the first phase, in return for nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli jails.
The deal that I first put forward last May for the Middle East has finally come to fruition.
U.S. President Joe Biden on Sunday hailed the hard-fought agreement, one day before his successor, Donald Trump, returns to the White House.
So as we reflect on the news from Gaza today, we also remember all the victims of this war. We're mindful that the pursuit of a lasting peace, while never easy or quick, must always be our calling.
Helicopters carrying the 3 freed hostages landed outside a hospital in Ramat Gan after nightfall, and the crowd there rejoiced.
I was able to touch her for a few seconds and to hear her voice saying, I love you.
Guy Jacobi said he is a friend of Emily Damari and was thankful for the brief moment he got to hold her hand on her way to the hospital.
And there's no words to describe what I'm feeling right now.
Since the October 7th massacre, our mission has been clear. Bring home all the hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. Today, as part of these ongoing efforts, we welcomed home 3 hostages, 3 young women after 471 days in Hamas captivity. We salute and embrace them and their families as they reunite after so long.
Perhaps most beautiful of all, this week we achieved an epic ceasefire agreement as a first step toward lasting peace in the Middle East. And this agreement could only have happened as a result of our historic victory in November. That was some victory. Was that greatest? But I'm glad to report that the first hostages have just been released. It would have never happened if I were president. Would have never happened. There was not even a thought of it.
Well, after some delay and a serious crackdown by the Israeli forces, huge crowds have gathered here in Bitonia in the occupied West Bank to celebrate the release of Palestinian prisoners and detainees. As you can see behind me, there are 2 large coaches carrying those prisoners and detainees who were released just a little earlier from the Offa prison in the occupied West Bank. According to officials, 90 Palestinian detainees and prisoners have been released today on the first day of the ceasefire agreement. The majority of them women, and there are, of course, some minors, teenagers on that list as well. But for the families gathered here waiting to be reunited with their loved ones, this is a huge moment of celebration. It is a deeply emotional moment for many who have been separated from their loved ones for an extended period of time, some of them months, some of them years. And of course, this is the first stage of what is...
Green Lamb Laminates presents CNN News 18 Primetime Studio.
We're live from the CNN News 18 Primetime Studio, brought to you by Green Lamb Laminates. Viewers, a new version of Donald Trump takes charge today in just about 45 minutes to an hour. This, the 47th president version, so to speak, as opposed to the 45th president version, has a great chance to look more presidential. Trump has everything he needs to do that. A more sweeping and inclusive electoral mandate, which translates into a greater political legitimacy, majorities in both houses of the American legislature, more experience, and a more ambitious